And greetings. Happy Thursday. Welcome here to the Steve Deace Show, live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio and podcast with Aaron McIntyre and Todd Erzin. I'm Steve Deace. We are brought to you by our friends over at Preborn. If you want to spend maybe the best $28 you're going to spend your entire life, you can donate it right now to our friends at Preborn. I mean, if you've got it, you can donate even more. But why did I come up with $28? Because even with Bidenflation or Kamalaflation, that's still all it costs for one of these ultrasounds that Preborn confronts mothers considering the murder of their children with. And there are pretty decent odds that when confronted with the knowledge, the confirmation that is not an unviable tissue mass, but another person. That heartbeat doesn't belong to her, but somebody else, another person. That mom will quite often choose life. And then Preborn is there for them as well, sometimes up to 2 years after the child is born, with counseling, car seats, formula, diapers, whatever they need. They love them both, but it all starts with pricking the conscience with that ultrasound, and it's just $28. I mean, where else today can you know that you've got pretty decent odds of saving a life for only $28, and it's tax deductible as well. Everything they do for both the mom and the baby is free, even though it's not actually free. So we cover those costs, we who donate. And so many of you have. Let's keep it going. Save so many more babies with Preborn. Go to preborn.com/Steve. That's preborn.com/Steve. Also want to let you know that tonight, mark your calendars. All right. They're doing the DNC roast tonight for the final evening here on BlazeTV. Bridget Fedesi, Stu, Sarah Gonzalez, Dave Landau, Alex Stein, post-speech analysis from Glenn Beck. That coming your way and more tonight as they wrap up the drunk, narcissistic cacklers DNC, otherwise known as the Democratic National Convention, coming your way. That graphic is something else, by the way. I mean, that graphic. Wow. All right. See whoever did that. Well done. See you tonight. 9 o'clock sharp here on Blaze TV or on YouTube as well, or on X as well. And hello to those of you watching us on X right now. All right, tonight, right here on Blaze TV. All right, today, right here on the show. At the bottom of this hour, Robert Davi is going to join us. You may not know the name, but you definitely know the face. He's one of the most prolific character actors of this era. And some of you might remember a little movie called The Goonies, for example. Yeah, has a bit of a following, right?
Die Hard.
Yeah, Die Hard. It's a franchise a few people have partook of over the years. He is Leonid Brezhnev in the new Reagan film starring Dennis Quaid that comes out here a week from Friday. And he's going to join us later in the show here at the bottom of the hour. So don't miss that. Next hour, we will spend all of it continuing on. We're going to at least finish chapter 3 of the book of Romans, and we'll see if we get into chapter 4 or not. You never know where the Spirit leads or where our big mouths take us to during the time that we have. But we'll continue Theology Thursday and that series on Romans in the next hour of the show. But let's continue on by beginning, as we always do, first and foremost, with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Is This Bad? The Secretary of Commerce for the Biden-Harris administration, Gina Raimondo, was asked by ABC News last night to react to the news of the downward revision to last year's job numbers of 818,000. Again, this is the Biden-Harris administration's Secretary of Commerce.
When you hear that, do you potentially think that this new numbers could be a liability for this campaign?
No. When I hear that, first of all, I don't believe it, because I've never heard Donald Trump say anything truthful.
It is, though, from the Bureau of Labor.
I'm not familiar with that.
I'm sure Miss Secretary of Commerce has a wonderful singing voice. Elsewhere at night 3 of the DNC, this happened.
But we will only be heard if we vote. As the saying goes, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
I'm not going to say anything. Tim Walz spoke last night, too.
I had 24 kids in my high school class, and none of them went to Yale.
As Jordan Schachtel at the Dossier pointed out, here are the speakers at the DNC who attended Ivy League schools. Cory Booker, Yale. Amy Klobuchar, Yale. Bill Clinton, Yale. Jared Polis, Princeton. Olivia Troy, Penn. Mindy Kaling, Dartmouth. Pete Buttigieg, Harvard. Amanda Gorman, Harvard. John Legend, Penn. And Oprah Winfrey, a billionaire, had these comments.
I've seen racism and sexism and income inequality and division. I've not only seen it, At times, I've been on the receiving end of it.
Checking in on the border. No, not that border. Here's Steve Cortez.
Hey, Steve Cortez here on the west side of Chicago, Democratic National Convention at United Center. The Democrats, of course, want open borders and want an endless stream of illegal migrants pouring into the United States. This is my new acquaintance, Edwin. Say hello.
My name is Edwin. Nice to meet you.
All right, Edwin is from Venezuela, and we're going to take Edwin into the DNC so that he can meet the Democrats who want open borders. He should meet his new friends, hear the speakers, and learn about the Democratic Party. So, Edwin, let's head in, shall we?
Excelente.
Right. This is Edwin from Venezuela, migrant, invited in by the Democrat Party. He'd like to come into the Democrat convention.
You have to get your credentials. Yep, you have to go to Jackson.
Yep. Wait, you mean he needs credentials and permission to come in?
Yes.
To get past the wall?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like a border wall in a way, huh?
Yeah. You have to have ID, credentials. You can come
Okay, to come to the United States?
No, to come
Not to come to the
here.
United States, okay, but to come to the Democrat convention.
Here, baby.
Okay. You believe in security. You believe in securing a boundary. Edwin can't come in.
That's all I know.
Moving on, a recent hire at the Nuclear Security Wing of the Department of Energy had previously called for disarmament policies, which of course reduces or eliminates nuclear weapons, arguing that advancing quote-unquote queer theory was essential to that agenda as well as important to America's national security. The Biden-Harris administration announced Sneha Nair had been appointed as special assistant at the National Nuclear Security Administration in February of 2024. Nair believes eradicating purported white supremacy in the nuclear field, as well as, quote, queering nuclear weapons as part of her diversity, equity, and inclusion push, she believes is essential for deterring threats to nuclear energy facilities in the United States. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln announced this week it's going to be closing its Office of Diversity and Inclusion. UNL Chancellor Rodney Bennett made the announcement in a letter to students this week. And finally, Donald Trump went on comedian Theo Von's This Past Weekend podcast, and the duo actually discussed Trump's oldest brother, Fred, and his alcoholism, which ultimately led to his death. They discussed that at length. It was a pretty earnest, hard conversation that's worth listening to in its entirety, but it led to a broader conversation about drugs and addiction. You just don't see this side of Trump that often. Here they are discussing cocaine for 1 minute.
No, I would just do cocaine. That was really, yeah. So not just, yeah.
That's down and dirty, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it was, yeah.
But you don't anymore?
No, I don't do it anymore, man, and I'm not doing it.
Is it too much? Too much to handle?
Some of the stuff started to get a real rattle in it, too. I don't know where we were even getting it from in this country, but yeah, it started to make me feel like I was a mechanic or something.
So the thing you go back to then is alcohol for the most part.
Right, yeah, but what I want probably is cocaine, but I know that if I have a drink, then it'll be like, okay, well, I had a drink, then I can do this.
Is cocaine a stronger up?
Yeah. Cocaine
so you're way up with cocaine more than anything else you can think of.
Cocaine will turn you into a damn owl, homie, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. You'll be out on your own porch, you know, and you'll be your own street lamp. You're freaking...
And is that a good feeling? Well,
no,
it's horrible. A miserable feeling.
But you do it anyway, just like the guy you're saying with the scotch.
And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's Montage brought to you by our friends over at Patriot Mobile, on the cutting edge of building the necessary but still not fully here parallel economy. Thankfully, one place where it fully is with one product that we all need to use in this day and age, and that is our mobile phones. You can make the switch today to our friends over at Patriot Mobile. Take advantage of their outstanding customer service team that is U.S.-based, which means you'll be able to understand what they say, and they will customize whatever you want to do for you and your family's needs, whether that is to keep your phone, upgrade your phone, keep your number, switch your number, whatever it is that you want to do. And if you use my promo code Steve when you go to make the switch, you'll get a free month of service today with the offer code Steve at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Use the offer code Steve at patriotmobile.com/Steve to get a free month of service today. patriotmobile.com/Steve, offer code Steve. A couple of things from Aaron's montage. You know what? Really, one point I think I want to make, because there's numerous interesting things in Aaron's montage, as there always are. 2 points, actually. One really quick. That number, I looked it up yesterday. That 818,000 people that have just disappeared off the labor rolls this month. Just to put that into context, I mentioned when we talked about this briefly yesterday, we don't even have a city in our home state of Iowa that has that many people. So after the show, I was curious, how many cities anywhere in America are of that size by population? the amount of people who have disappeared off the labor rolls just this month would be the 18th largest city in the United States. And to put that further in perspective, that's more people than live in Seattle, more people that live in Boston, more people than live in Denver, which has one of the busiest airports in the world, more people than live in Las Vegas, more people than live in Washington, D.C., actually.
Steve, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what a city is. I've never seen a map. None of this computes. What is labor? What are jobs? What are anything?
Correct.
Now, do I get a federal high-paying job because of what I just said?
Aaron, didn't you have a clip earlier this year? One of their top economic advisors
Jared Bernstein
didn't understand the lending and money printing practices of the U.S. government that he's supposedly in charge of economically advising, right? So here we are. There's many lines from Calvin that are quoted both affirmatively and negatively, but this one I think we can all agree, regardless of what you think of old John theologically, we can quote this one affirmatively. Wicked and incompetent rulers are how God judges a nation. Amen?
Amen.
And that's on parade in what you just saw there. Something else that's on parade that I want to make sure we mention, because it occurred to me this morning, and I posted about it on X, and I want to bring this to you guys' attention and mention it here. You know, we have talked a lot on this show over the last few years, and I've mentioned many times, I would love to go back and tell my 2007 and 2006, when I first made the switch to sports talk, from sports talk radio to news on the big blowtorch here in Des Moines, WHO, or go tell myself when I left HO and started to, see if we could build a national platform in 2011, that I'm going to use the term demonic in my analysis frequently. I mean, back in those days, locally, I'd use the term pagan all the time, and it drove, people were like, you can't say that. Well, I'm going to, because it's what I think is true, and you can't convince me otherwise. Okay? And we've graduated, I think, now from pagan to just outright demonic. And these conventions that these two parties have held, when you see the stuff that has been going on, Paul writes in one of his epistles in the scriptures that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against spiritual strongholds, principalities, all right? Are things, enemies that are from the unseen realm, is basically what he is saying. And every so often, these things become so prevalent, these forces do, that they spill out into the seen realm. And you see a level of darkness that you just can't explain. And I remember a conversation that some of us got to have privately with Tucker Carlson a few years ago when he came here to speak at the Leadership Summit. Not the year that he emceed with the candidates, but the year before when he came to speak. And a few of us got to have a private dinner with Tucker the night before. And I think I told this story at the time, right? Yeah. And we asked him, hey, what happened to you? You're talking like us now. And for many, many years, we watched you on CNN or MSNBC. You were the bow-tied libertarian technocrat who, frankly, thought people like us were holding Republicans back and why we weren't winning more elections. And now you're at the time you were still on Fox, had the #1 show in the country, okay, and now you're on the largest platform in the country. You have the biggest show in the country, and it's a network that's moving left while you are moving further right. And now you're sounding more like us than ever before. What's happened to you? And he mentioned two things. One, the strong faith of his wife had an influence on him positively, but secondly, negatively, seeing what is happening in the culture, that people are choosing policies and ideas that for many, many years growing up, his dad is a political operative and growing up around the D.C. scene and going trick-or-treating with other kids whose parents were Democrat operatives, and they hung out together, they went to school together, they partied together, they grew up together, and took their kids to Little League games and stuff and soccer games later on together. And you got to know people. You could see why people might think the government should provide Medicare for people, or there should be some form of, an amnesty program for undocumented people that have lived here for so long and made roots. And even if you think it's still not necessarily what you believe, you have empathy. You can see now why someone who is a well-meaning, sincere individual could come to conclusions that you do not via these kinds of conversations. And he said, what's happened the last few years, and so this was in 2021, 2022 is when he said this to us. He said, what's happened the last few years is there are things happening in this country I can't explain. That there is no benefit to mutilating our children. No one benefits from this. At least no one that's not from darkness, he said, benefits from this. Nothing that's deserving of empathy, regardless of viewpoint or ideology, benefits from many of the things we're talking about as a people right now. And he said the only conclusion I can come to, all right, having been around more people who think different than me than the average Republican has, is we're dealing with something different. Because I go back and I ask those friends, he said, and they don't have explanations for me. And they can't explain why they're now suddenly trumpeting things that just a few years ago they would have thought we can't ever let that kind of stuff in. It's crazy. Even if they thought it was good, they wouldn't have talked about it openly because it would cost them elections. And now it's just bulls on parade. You know, what's happened here?
In many ways, he's James at the end of your movie. I still don't know about all this God stuff,
Great
but
analogy.
I've seen some demons.
Yeah, I've seen things, yes. And he's like, I can't come to any conclusion that something spiritually dark is happening in this country. And I'm barely a nominal Christian. And a year later, he came back to us and said he's actually been reading the Bible for the first time in his life. But he's like, I still don't quite understand it, but I know what politics looks like. I know what real political disagreement looks like. That's not what this is. This is something else. Indeed it is. Indeed it is. And you're seeing that confirmed. This spiritual warfare in the unseen realm has played itself out in these two-party conventions that we've had a chance to see here this summer. And in many respects, what they represent is a metaphor, if not just flat out symbolic manifestation of the spiritual state of things in America, which would make sense because they are the two major parties, and ultimately politics is how we put our faith and ethics into action. That's what it does. That's not what it is. Okay, politics, what is it? It's how we avoid civil war in America. That's what it is. It's how we conduct civil war in America. And so that we have, the victims are ballots and candidates and not each other in our neighborhoods and our streets. Okay, all right, that's what it is. Okay, but what it does is it puts somebody's faith and ethics into action. That's what it does. And when you look at what you've seen here this week, and you see Oprah Winfrey up there last night with a net worth of about $3 billion talking about being a victim. And I used to call her in the early iterations of this show when she was still on TV daily, the high priestess of American paganism. The spirit of the age built her up. She wasn't political or partisan much of our childhood, and then the Obamas showed up, and now all of a sudden she's a apparatchik, all right? But understand, they built her up so that she could become an apparatchik, and the entire time that you thought she was nice and gentle and just, you get a car and you get a car, what she was modeling really was the vanguard of the Yas Queen matriarchy. I'm perpetually unmarried, I'm perpetually without kids, I intentionally put off what are not the only, but the primary reasons for why I exist as a woman, just as a lot of guys are putting off marriage and family and being husbands and fathers, which is the primary reason why they exist as a man. Okay, putting those duties off too, those callings off too. I would say those privileges off too. The greatest thing I'll ever do in my life is be a dad, including the times I failed at it. And she's up there perpetuating a victimhood narrative. Why? And how can she do this as a billionaire without even blushing? No conscience, like sociopathic level of no self-awareness. Tim Walz up there, the party that owns all these Ivy League schools, took them all over. They own them all. Now mocking J.D. Vance for going to one of them. And again, no blushing, nothing. Nothing at all. But just can mainline that level of no self-awareness. How? I can tell you how. That's how cults behave. If they ever admit we've arrived, we've made progress, the system is flawed, maybe even systemically so, but still overall the fairest system any human society has ever conducted, they ever admit these things, their entire narrative blows up. Again, man, I hate to say this because it's kind of my own hobby in the summer when I get bored late at night, but watching old sporting events plus the commercials on YouTube really does truly give you a real-time perspective of how things have changed around here. All the talking points that they're saying today, they were saying in 1977 and 1983. It's right there in their commercials. It's the same stuff. Now, keep in mind, that's one generation removed from marches in Selma and high-pressure water hoses and Jim Crow and Eisenhower sending the National Guard in. You know what I'm saying? So that's different. There were people who were like, I've seen some things. Let me tell you what America did to people with my skin color. But 40 years later, we're saying all the same things like nothing's changed, and a black female billionaire is up there saying it to people without any self-awareness. Because cults let you, give you, and encourage and incentivize you to remove the self-awareness. It's not required of you. And in many respects, what the Democratic Party really is right now is it's a flat-out demonic construct. That's flat out what it is. These are people that openly shake their fist at God, openly do it. Openly defiant, like the Romans 1 stuff we read a few weeks ago on the show. These are stained glass window smashers. They look for stained glass windows to smash. They didn't accidentally throw a baseball through the window. They took a billy club to it. They're looking to smash the windows. They want to do it. Nietzsche is their guru. Although when Nietzsche says God is dead, we have killed him, it was a lament. He was lamenting what modern society was doing at the time. This is a mantra. It's a battle cry to these people. They want to do this. They're looking to do it. I mean, this is the stuff of Romans 1. That's really what it is. And that's their policies reflect that, and their zeal reflects that, their tactics reflect that. They are the very embodiment of the spirit of the age. So then who are we on our side? Who are we? If the Democrats are the embodiment of the spirit of the age, the Republicans are the embodiment of the state of the church, in my view. Now, there's a remnant out there. There always is. Elijah, at his lowest point, is promised by the Lord. There's always a remnant. There's always a remnant that hasn't taken the knee to Baal, who was the symbol for the spirit of the age in his era, his day. And there's a remnant out there trying to push through this, that are like the sons of Issachar, who have this. We've mentioned that biblical reference many times on the show. They're only mentioned one time, as David is calling and aligning his forces together, and the sons of Issachar are described as men who understood the times and what to do about them. There's that remnant is trying to push through, but it is surrounded and overcome, just like there's a remnant of churches like this, but they are surrounded and overcome by what is the propensity, what's the plurality. And I would put the plurality, I divide them into three groups. There's what I would call the megachurch. So well off, they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to risk anything. As Todd likes to say, comfort is their idol. But some of that comfort is not so much driven by wealth and the accoutrements of liberty and, the nuances of pop culture. It's driven by a visceral fear of man. They fear men more than God. And that's why you'll go to a lot of mega churches and you'll hear a form of what I would call static orthodoxy, meaning they are preaching from the Bible, though, as if it is independent of the world in which we live, as opposed to transcendent over the world in which we live. And there is a difference. And so these are almost like Protestant monasteries, evangelical monasteries. No one's got a bowl haircut and dressed like Friar Tuck, and everybody jumps in an SUV, but the mindset is the same, that somehow you've concocted a campus of something, and maybe multiple campuses of something that inoculates you from the larger spirit of the age, an evangelical monasticism. And so there's this static orthodoxy where the word is preached, but there's never an application that would then come into conflict with the culture. The second group, I would call this kind of the nostalgia church. And this is, if we could just make things work precisely as they did before. Use the exact same leaders as we did before, and these leaders hold on and on and on and on and on and on and on, and you have no idea who their successors are going to be, and neither do they, because they haven't trained them. And they get to the point that they think narcissism is like tradition, like their method of doing things, their style of doing things. They'll even create content now about what God once did through them. Like it's a monument to themselves, as opposed to trying to humbly discern what is God doing now and whom is he doing it through. And you see this kind of embodied in a small way when the disciples are sitting there, like when Peter sees Jesus at it's the transfiguration, right, with Moses and Elijah. Mm-hmm. And Peter's like, I'm a Jewish kid and this is the ultimate fantasy, Messiah, the deliverer, and the greatest prophet. We're just going to sit right here. We're going to build an altar. We're never going to move. And we're going to fire up the judge. Mama, tell us about the good old days. That was his reaction. And that's kind of what's happened in this generation. It's a nostalgia-driven church. If it looks the way it looked before, and the processes are the same as before, and the speakers and leaders are the same as before, because we don't even know who the successors are because we're not grooming any. And just hold on and hold on and hold on, recycle. America will be great again, the church will be great again, etc. The third group, I would call this the seeker-sensitive / false church. These are churches producing masses of undiscipled, uncatechized people on any level at all. They've been taught a me-centered religion, which is a false gospel. Sometimes it's referred to and has different iterations, sometimes like the prosperity gospel. But these churches are legion right now. They're run by hirelings. And if they're not false teachers from the outset, they're so watered down and so weak, they eventually get infiltrated by false teachers. And they produce all kinds of false converts. And they eventually end up succumbing to the very spirit of the age they really believe that they're opposing. And they'll start off thinking there's a thing. That's how Tim Keller starts off writing books early on in his ministry that are great and powerful, thinking there's a third way. And then by the end of his ministry, he is basically a proxy for the Democratic Party and segregating believers by vax status in his own New York City congregation. And that's how people can go to his church and then go on the air on MSNBC. He had MSNBC people going to his church. They would leave his church and not feel convicted at all. They should change their approach to what they're saying on MSNBC. But instead, they were completely comfortable maintaining it. And in many respects, you saw this on parade during the Republican convention, and you see this on parade on the right daily. And I don't know what the solution to this is other than revival. I don't know how to get out of this kind of a vortex. But I think we at least should start by understanding the signs of the times and seeing what they actually are. And then maybe we can, the Spirit is kind, come up with what to do about it. Because, we're in an era right now where after everything Ron DeSantis has done in Florida, he's got people in his own caucus afraid of the Sierra Club. Did you even know the Sierra Club was still around?
Yeah.
I had no idea they were even around. Like, do you know what's coming after Kim Reynolds here in our home state of Iowa if she doesn't run again? I don't. Neither do I. See what I'm saying? What's coming next? We don't know. We're trapped in this vortex. And it's either we have leaders that won't confront the culture. We have leaders that the number one requirement is that they get to remain leaders at all costs. No matter how spent of a force they are, no matter how past their prime they are, they have to remain the leaders at all costs. And if you don't agree with that, you're some kind of quisling traitor, or you want the devil to win. Or the third group is just flat out apostasy. And that's all over the ranks of our side, and this is why we're so ineffective up against theirs. More in a moment. A special announcement for you. And Aaron, give me a thumbs up if that comes through, okay? Special announcement for you guys. When this election is over, we're all going to need a break. All right, we're going to have to vent some frustration, blow off some steam. You can join me, Daniel Horowitz, and Rick Green at the 3-day constitutional defense course at the Patriot Academy campus outside of Fredericksburg, Texas. This is going to be the first time that all three of us will be able to do one of these together, attend and do an event together. So make sure you bring your spouse, kids, friends, anyone else who loves the country, would like to spend a few days with us discussing the topics that you hear every time you listen to this podcast. That's coming up on November 16th through the 18th. And it's a good time of year to visit Fredericksburg, Texas, by the way, too. The weather will be beautiful down there that time of year. November 16th to the 18th, if you want to join us, a chance to get some unique firearms training that also combines that with classroom training on the Constitution. Go to patriotacademy.com/Steve. Again, that's patriotacademy.com/Steve. Spots are limited, so don't hesitate. If you want to join us here after the election in November, the 16th to the 18th, patriotacademy.com/Steve. All right, I want to get you guys' thoughts on what I was just laying out, what we've seen at the respective conventions between the two parties. And it kind of being, in many respects, a metaphor for where the country is at spiritually, where the Democrats are just flat out the embodiment of the spirit of the age, and in its zeal and aggression and in its goals. And the Republicans represent the state, the fractured state of the American church in terms of a fractured psyche. I don't mean this just in terms of different traditions and denominations. I don't really mean it in that context at all, but really a fractured psyche. It's off mission. And when we say the Republicans are off message, or this candidate is off message, that's another way of saying, in an ecclesiastical sense, your church is off mission, right? I just described three different variations, and there's some churches that would embody two of them, if not all three at different points, but where the church is off mission. It's driven by isolation. And I don't want that confrontation. I don't want that smoke. And we can create kind of a static form of orthodoxy where we don't have to actually ever make any enemies. Okay. Even though our Lord was crucified, we somehow think that we can escape such any kind of threat or fate. The other group, which is just, it's based on nostalgia, and it's much more about the name on the back of the jersey than the name on the front. And you know, these people, these leaders are like the Rolling Stones, who are still touring in their 80s. And, you know, they're still out there doing their thing in their 80s, which is great. If they had like an apprentice or somebody in their 50s or 60s they were bringing with them that you knew that was getting ready to take their place. But do you ever really see that at all? I mean, just think of a great church leader in the 70s and 80s that you can see still doing shows, still preaching, still touring the country, doing events. Does he bring his junior? Maybe they do, but you don't see that very often, right? That's why we don't know who that next generation is. So that's the nostalgia church. And then the third church is open apostate. And I think the seeker-sensitive movement and everything about it ended up either becomes a window to apostasy or is in and of itself, and opens itself up to eventually being taken over by prosperity gospel, hackery, and things of that nature, and creates a lot of false converts, a lot of people who haven't been catechized or discipled, because then they would leave such entities realizing that they're being misled. That's what I did, for example. All right. And so this remnant of those who understand what time it is and are willing to do something about it are basically just drowned out, you know, and that's how you end up in a situation where a prayer is offered to a demon one night at the GOP convention. They're praying to demons every night at the Democratic convention. And that doesn't mean everybody has to agree on religious belief, okay? But I'm not platforming a prayer to a demon. I mean, I'll give you freedom of your faith. If you want to do that on your time, fine. If your false religion leads you and guides you into being aligned with me on great principles and things, I'm totally okay with that. You know, but I'm also not going to offer up in an ecclesiastical form anything I'm a part of, a prayer to such a false belief either. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but without being catechized or discipled, you can't achieve those distinctions. You'll just go from one extreme to the other. Everybody has to agree with me, otherwise we can't do anything, or you don't have to agree with me really fundamentally at all, and just actually co-opt me at every sense of the term. Just wear my jersey, right? You know. And so, you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, we're so far down the road of this. You know, you've been doing this your whole career, Steve, on some level, trying to communicate. I mean, really, that's when I say I'm trying to communicate the exact same thing. So have you. In different ways, whatever way it makes you hear. You've done this in politics in terms of groupies, gangsters, all this stuff. Try to get people self-aware of what exactly is going on. And, you know, when we talk about revival or bust, you laid out 3 different ways in which I think it's actually... it's worse. It's not just self-awareness, but to the degree awareness does step in, they are keeping consciously genuine revival at bay. Because like that senior pastor who spoke up at that convention you were at a year ago or so,
mm-hmm.
he reminded everybody, y'all know what revival really means?
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that people do, they know. They look around and like, I don't know. I kind of like Thunderdome. I just can't escape that logic anymore, especially after 2022. We just thought, you know, it's the wake up call, not just for Republicans or for Trump or anybody. Like that, it's how you late. Maybe I got this whole religion thing wrong. And I'm seeing demons.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, why don't we give the demons another shot? Which is why also not enough has changed in my mind that I think that's why I think Kamala and company are going to win.
When you don't understand the signs of the times, I'm glad you reset the 2022 midterms, because we have behaved on the right for the last 2 years as if that election didn't actually happen. Okay. And so and some of it's understandable. I mean, many of us, myself included, think that our side and our guy got robbed in the 2020 presidential election. So the desire to undo the damage that's been done to the country since then, some of that comes from a decent place and a good place, okay? But if you completely just remove the election we had in front of us and between these two events, where the American people, I think, particularly one group in particular I want to address, the normies, said something to us very profound. Not good, but profound. And we need to hear it to understand what will win moving forward starting in this cycle. Because 2022 was the first time that the party out of power in the White House did not automatically benefit from the unpopularity of the party that's in the White House. All of our lives. That's why that 2002 midterm is so rare, where George W. Bush went from being the first president since the late 19th century to lose the popular vote but win the presidency, to then being the rare president ever who gained seats in his first midterm election, when Barack Obama got destroyed and got destroyed even worse in his second midterm election. Bill Clinton got utterly annihilated in his first midterm. That was the Contract with America election, okay? Ronald Reagan ended up losing the Senate, okay? I mean, it's hard to do this, you know.
What happened between 2000 and 2002 that probably is responsible for that?
That's why I was just going to say, a unique outlier where Bush did such a phenomenal job of rallying and uniting the country in the moments after 9/11, and there was a feel-good unity that carried over there, and that's why it was an outlier, okay? I mean, Trump lost 40 House seats in his first midterm election. So what happened this time where on the issues in the exit polling and in the polling leading up to those midterms, everything indicated that the normies were going to do what they always do. Just blindly vote for whoever's not in power to express their distaste for the side that is. And this time they didn't do that. What happened? Well, I think you're learning, and many normies come out of the kinds of churches that we were just talking about here. They're not ideological anymore. The normies are sheep. They're barely paying attention. They're not ideologically driven. And see, if you don't realize that, you're going to make some of the mistakes that I think Trump has made the last couple of years of moving left on. Trump is running a playbook from 2012, which, by the way, wasn't successful. Okay. But that Mitt Romney's getting attacked for having binders full of women, and he's the pro-life party's nominee. So let me run ads in 5 battleground states, and that Mitt Romney ran ads in 5 battleground states saying that he was pro-choice. He lost every one of them. Okay. That's a playbook from another era. This last election proved with these normies, we're not in that era anymore. The normies, if you were a Republican governor and they viewed you as a strong leader, now we wouldn't view Mike DeWine as a strong leader.
No.
But they did. Like, Mike DeWine does not have much in common with Ron DeSantis, right?
Correct.
Yet they each won battleground states by about 15 to 20 points. They were seen as strong leaders. Ideologically, the normies are sheep. Sheep are grazers. They're just grazing here. And they need a shepherd. And if it looks like you're the strong leader, you win the normies. If you run from what you believe, if you hide from what you believe, if you step away from what you believe, if you show weakness from what you believe, you don't come across as a strong leader. That's a lesson I think we need to take away from 2022. The governors who were viewed as strong leaders all won, and won pretty convincingly. The Republican Congress, who refused to run on any platform at all under Mitch McConnell's guidance other than Joe Biden is unpopular, how did they do? They way underperformed. We had even though we had huge hatred for the system in 2022, it was one of the most pro-incumbent elections we've ever had. Normies just voting for people they thought were the strong leaders. Sheep easily led astray. We have to recognize the environment in which we are actually in, Aaron, not the environment that we wished we were in or we used to be in. But if you're in nostalgia church, you're going to run the game plan from 1988. You're going to run the game plan from 2012. And you're not going to see things. This is why I think, by the way, J.D. Vance is so good at this from a messaging standpoint. I think he understands the era and the times that we're in. And that's why the month of messaging that he has done is maybe the best I've ever seen from a Republican in a high-profile national setting. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
3 words: fat, happy, docile. Fat, happy, docile. There's a certain segment of our audience, I'm sure that will ring a bell for in a different context. You use the word sheep. I want to use a different livestock metaphor. Growing up, we had a small farm. We raised cattle. And our bull, his name was Brownie. Guess what color he was? He was Brownie. He was brown. Our bull, Brownie, for about 10 years, sired several heifers. And that's what we would raise. We didn't have a ton, maybe 6, 7, 8 max at one time. And every couple of years, we'd get a bucket of corn. We'd dump some out in the trough for Brownie in the feedlot. And then we'd get another bucket, and we'd select a couple of cows, whether they're steers or heifers that he had sired, lead them on a trailer. And Brownie would never see those cows again. But Brownie was happy. He was happy. He was feasting on corn. He was just fat, happy, docile. Fat, happy, docile. Then after about a decade or so, I think we decided we were done kind of raising cows. We just wanted to rent the pasture out. So it was Brownie's turn to get on the trailer. And we got a bucket of corn. And cows, they're not stupid. They're not like sheep. They have good memory. Do you think Brownie wanted to get on that trailer? No, he didn't. Fat, happy, docile. What are those ideal terms for? Ideal terms for any form of livestock, especially cattle, who are what? A pleasant disposition for what's happening next, which is what? Slaughter. Mm-hmm. The church, by and large, has become fat, happy, and docile. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we saw a bunch of people a bunch of things whatever, we saw a bunch of our rights. We saw a bunch of constitutional things get on the trailer and we've never seen them again. We've seen a lot of things get on the trailer and we've never seen them again. But we've got our corn over here, and so we're fat, happy, and docile. The Democrats, by and large, are just telling you we're the butchers. And we're fat. I mean, basically, yeah, we're fattening you up. I think that's the dynamic that we've seen from these two conventions. On the one hand, fat, happy, docile, ready to get butchered, basically. And then on the other hand, we're your Huckleberry. We'll do it for you.
What you said is literally true. Have you seen this clip going around with Dana Bash on CNN talking about
they're
the appeal of
specifically
dim
messaging
walls?
the low T men?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
which, by the way, if you're just doing marketing numbers, we're just doing math, that is smart.
It's a
because that would be the vast
industry.
majority of men in America. Yeah. Basically, it was Dana Bash saying they are going after the vast majority of men in America because the vast majority of men in America are low T. You know a tree by its fruit, like at the state of the country. The vast majority of men in America are scrolling on their phones while Leah Thomas is out there destroying their daughter's, lifetime of work with, some really bad mascara. Just scrolling through their phones. That's the vast majority of men in America. So give the devil his due. He knows his audience.
Yes.
He made it. He created it. He knows who his audience is, and he's correct about that. And I will tell you, the temptation always is when a culture comes to these kinds of forks in the road, and the it's shifting sand and the ground is shrinking underneath our feet. The temptation is to try to play into the forces that are shrinking the ground underneath your feet. When what you actually need to do is the opposite. Because even playing into it a little bit just makes the shrinking ground under your feet even worse. You're aiding and abetting it, in fact. Hey, all right, fine, I'll give you that ground. Notice they don't give any ground back to you. Ever notice that when you do that?
Yeah.
You ever notice that? They don't ever give anything back to you. It's always, I've altered the deal, pray I've not altered it any further. That's always how it ends.
I notice it all the time. I just can't tell if everybody else on our side notices it or just don't care instead of complaining back to me when I'm over the target on the fact that men are weak, because we are.
We'll come back. It'll be Theology Thursday. When we return, we'll finish chapter 3 of Romans, then we'll see how far we get after that. Stay tuned. We are back with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Todd Erzen, Aaron McIntyre, and all of you. And all of you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Take advantage of that by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Getter. And then if you listen to the podcast version, if you wouldn't mind doing this for us, man, we would appreciate a bunch. You can leave us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. And thank you to all of you who have, and a lot of you have. So keep those coming, please. And then also you can hit subscribe or follow as whatever applies. It's follow on iTunes. It's subscribe mostly everywhere else. And that'll make sure that every time we do one of these new episodes, it'll be right there in your feed every single time. A little quick programming note. I know we promised Robert Davi of Goonies and Die Hard and many other film and TV show fame in advance of the release of the Reagan film next week. We struggled to connect with him during the break. So we're going to try to reschedule him for some open time on Monday, and it'll still be in advance of the Reagan film anyway. It comes out a week from tomorrow. I was at the gym yesterday. I texted one of the producers for Reagan, John Sullivan, who was one of my producers for Nefarious. Because up on the screens at the gym yesterday while I'm lifting, I see Dennis Quaid is on the Today Show talking about the Reagan film. Which, given its content and subject matter and who produced it, I texted John, I'm like, well done. I don't know how you managed to make that happen, but maybe the system felt like it needed to give you a make good after what Facebook has tried doing to this movie. Okay. Facebook basically censored ads for the Reagan film on the grounds that it could be seen as partisan and politically impactful in an election year. These people, man.
What's like gaslighting? It's like they just play out every single term until it's
correct.
Has no meaning anymore, and it's just it's just life. It's just air you're breathing.
This is a continuation of the thing we were just discussing.
Yeah.
We are fighting amongst ourselves about how much of our own ground that is already shrinking underneath our feet.
Yeah.
All right. That already is extremely limited. Okay. And we're living the Keynesian view of culture war right now, okay, where it's a zero-sum game, and every time they win, we lose, right? And so we're sitting here as the ground is shrinking underneath our feet, negotiating and arguing and fighting and spatting with one another about how much of our own shrinking ground we are going to offer them up. Meanwhile, they don't skip a beat, man. Yeah. They're just banning films from running ads because of political reasons.
I mean, last year, every Democrat political in-person gathering was, here are these rock stars, and oh, by the way, Kamala's showing up. But sure, the Dennis Quaid, Ronald Reagan movie about a president from the
40
80s.
years ago. Yes.
Yes, that's putting the thumb on the scale too much.
Yes. All right, we're going to get to Theology Thursday, brought to you by our friends over at Lumen. It's the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you even tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, your workouts, your sleep, and even stress management for you the rest of the day. All you've got to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism and how it's working and whether it's working the way that you want it to. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will also still give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. And this is so key because your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into fuel that keeps you going. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Steve. LUMEN is how that is spelled. Lumen.me/Steve. That's lumen.me/Steve. You'll get 15% off your Lumen, and that's for 15% off your purchase at lumen.com/Steve. So we are going to finish up chapter 3 of Romans. And just to set the stage here, we spent a lot of time last week about a term Paul uses called propitiation. And what that means, and therefore what it says about the nature of the gospel and really the heart of God. And we used different analogies and metaphors to try to have us even come close to grasping what it means that God now goes from with us to now going instead of us, offering himself up on our behalf. So verses 27 through 31, we got into this a little bit last week, but let's start at 27 and go through 31, because this conclusion to this chapter, guys, I think kind of goes all together. All right. So in light now, Paul is talking about in light now of what God alone has done. None of us have a claim on God. God does not owe any of us anything. God did not have to do this. He's the violated one here, right? He's the one who's been betrayed. He's the spouse here, using the metaphor again of Christ and his church, like a broom and the bridegroom and the bride. He is the one that's been cheated on. He's the offended party here. So he doesn't owe us any of this, doesn't have to do any of this. But like we are commanded as men to love our brides as Christ loved the church, meaning a willingness to lay down our lives for them. He has done this for us as a propitiation for our sins, to pay the debt we could not pay, but we owed. And so that means none of us has any cause of boasting, any justification for thinking we're better than anybody else. So with that in mind, Paul says, starting in verse 27, then what becomes of our boasting? It is excluded. By what kind of law? By a law of works? No, but by the law of faith. For we hold that one is justified by faith apart from the works of the law. Or is God the God of Jews only? Is he not the God of Gentiles also? Yes, of Gentiles also. We talked about that last week. That's, I think, where we left off, talking about why so much of Paul's work here is talking about the differences between Jews and Gentiles, because he's, again, talking to the congregation that is the very first mixed, large setting congregation of Jewish and Gentile Christians here. All right? Since God is one, who will justify the circumcised by faith and the uncircumcised through faith? Do we then overthrow the law by this faith? By no means. On the contrary, we uphold the law. Now, Aaron has mentioned a term in the past known as antinomianism. And this term wasn't prevalent yet at the time that Paul is writing here in the first century. But this was often promulgated by a group called the Gnostics. And they were a prominent heretical sect at the time that the New Testament was literally being compiled and being written. Now, we have talked most of the time about the Gnostics in one particular context. That the term Gnostic comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge. This idea that there is some secret mantras, codes, knowledge that God has hidden from us. And it goes really right back to the lie the serpent says to Adam and Eve in the garden, that God is holding out. What God has revealed to you is not sufficient. That he either can't be trusted or it's jealous of you and doesn't want you to become like him. So he's holding back. Okay? You can be all you can be here by listening to me instead. And so we've talked about how we see aspects of that, so much of that in our culture today, okay? That there's always a hidden theorem. There's always some secret knowledge that only a few people that are really aware. Like the Jews aren't really Jews, they're Franks. And you just didn't read the right books to know this, says Candace Owens. That's a form of Gnosticism. But there was another aspect of Gnosticism as well. The Gnostics also taught that, so start here, since God is one, all right? Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. We are made in his image. We are one too. Body, soul, mind, and spirit. That's the makeup of what it means to be created in the image of God. No other beings, as far as we know, certainly not on this mortal coil, and as far as we know, nowhere else in the universe, is body, soul, mind, and spirit. We know of no other beings, at least right now, in the universe, made like us. And there certainly aren't any other beings, not your favorite pet, not the salamander, not the recluse spider you're calling the pest control for if you're living somewhere in Texas right now. Nowhere else on earth is there a being of body, soul, mind, and spirit made. That's what it means to be the Imago Dei. Nowhere else does this being exist on this planet except for human beings. And those things fuse into one, and that's what it means to be human. The Gnostics disagreed with this. And what they taught is that the life of the soul or the spirit was separate from the physical life. And if you're doing something spiritual, it is good. If you're doing something physical, it is bad. Or it has no value. Or it's morally neutral. Therefore, you can do with your body whatever you want. It's not a temple. You're not fearfully and wonderfully made in the image and likeness of God. He's not counted the hairs on your head. So if you want to join a sex club, you want to join an orgy group, you want to tune in, turn on, and drop out. You want to not work. Right? So much of Gnosticism was heavily influenced by Greco-Roman culture. The Greco-Roman world viewed manual labor as for people of the lower stock. The Greek life was the college life, a life of perpetual contemplation and seeking of significance. plowing a row, working a farm, that was beneath them. What we do with our physical body is of no value or bad. So do what you want with it. And out of this comes the phrase that we know today in theological circles as antinomianism, where the idea that now that we are Christians, now that we're spiritually renewed and reborn, we are free to do whatever we want with our physical bodies. It's a bastardization of what the doctrine of justification by faith actually means.
Not just our physical bodies, but our time. I mean, our incarnate time, because
like live a life of contemplation rather than do something of meaning, of actual meaning or substance.
So as long as because now that I'm saved, this is immaterial.
Correct. And what I think Paul is saying here is, it is actually a demonstration of the fruit of your justification by faith that you will uphold the law. Because you now have a new heart. Like what Jeremiah prophesied, their heart of stone has been replaced by a heart of flesh. Your desires are different. Your thoughts are different. Your purposes are different. And you desire these things now. Like we talked last week, it's not that we have to repent, it's that we get to. Because God does not have to offer that propitiation. He does not have to do this. He would be justified in just Thanos snapping this entire thing out of existence, given how he has been debased, disobeyed, betrayed. But that's not what he did. He laid down his life for his friends while we were still his enemies and didn't recognize him as such. So along those lines, our desires are now, the law is good. I mean, think about it. I mean, if I love my wife as Christ loved the church, if I put her first before me in all things, and then at the same time, she respects me as her husband, and I have the support. One of the Hebrew translations for the word helpmate actually is rescuer. So I have this, wherever I go, I know someone's in my corner. Whatever situation I'm in, I know I have a helpmate. I know someone is by my side, someone that will fight by my side, someone whose mission is the same as mine, someone whose purpose is aligned with mine. Someone who will satisfy my sensual desires, and I get to satisfy theirs. That's actually what makes for a good marriage and a fulfilling marriage, is doing that. And the law now is not a burden. It is a privilege. We understand it won't be easy to live the way God wants us to live, but it will always be better. Always, it will always be better. It will always be better. Ask Ben Affleck today, divorced again. Are all of his kids trannies? This guy has been nominated for every award. He's won how many millions of dollars? Ask Ben. He's done everything, and the world has recognized his greatness as an actor and a director and a filmmaker. He's got to be Batman. And you're sitting around thinking, if my wife were prettier, if she did this, dude couldn't stay married to Jennifer Garner and J-Lo. Brad Pitt couldn't stay married to Angelina Jolie. That's a cop-out, dude. Don't give me that. Those are lies from the devil. That doesn't mean it's wrong to want to be attracted to your wife, but if you've turned that into an idol to justify immorality and violating God's law, then you're beyond your basic human desires now, and you're in sin. If you act on it, the consequences that will come from it will eventually catch up to you, and you'll go back and wish that you had lived by God's way the entire time. That it's not always easy, but it's always better. And now that our desires are different, we now naturally, because we have supernaturally been changed, we now naturally want to uphold the law. We now naturally want to say to even unbelievers, this general revelation, this natural law that God has given to his creation, benefits believer and unbeliever alike. It benefits the just and the unjust alike to build societies predicated on these things, as opposed to societies that are not. And we want to live in a society that upholds that moral law rather than degrades it. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
The fact that I could not do better at the end of 3 chapters of this to sum up so importantly what needs to be summed up. And what you just said is exactly why this debate of faith versus works is so dumb. And it is so dumb because it is so wrong. Steve, what you just laid out, you may as well be talking about the laws of physics, laws of gravity. Because we are talking about, in either case, and rightly so, eternal laws of the universe. That's why when Steve says sometimes, maybe always, better, always. Always is the right answer. Why? Because it's a law of the universe. The only difference between these laws that Steve's laying out, the laws of the heart and the law of gravity, is that we are given a choice on whether we're going to follow them or not. That's the only difference. Other than that, it's an immutable law. That's not Todd Erson talking, by the way. We're going to go back. Origin. Let believers be edified so as not to entertain the thought that because they believe, this alone can suffice for them. St. Augustine, we feel that we should advise the faithful that they would endanger the salvation of their souls if they acted on the false assurance that faith alone is sufficient for salvation. St. Thomas Aquinas, some have been frequently deceived about sinning with impunity, believing that faith alone is sufficient for salvation. Those guys, right at the end, Steve Deace should be the 4th person because he just said the same thing. And here's why. When Steve started talking, it was because about God is one. Those 3 words you can kind of read as like a transition. They're really the whole point. And here's where I'm talking about Scott Hahn now. Says this, it helps you translate. This is a reference to Deuteronomy 6:4. What is Deuteronomy 6:4? Just when when it's asked in the Bible, how do you sum up the Gospels? Well, this is the first of the 2. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Sound familiar? This is a reference to Deuteronomy 6:4 as rendered in the Septuagint. The apostle seems to infer from this text that one God can have only one people who enter his covenant in one way. So even though the human family was once divided into the circumcised and the uncircumcised, the time has come to dismantle the partitions that once separated Jews from non-Jews. Salvation is found not in Israel's law, but in Israel's Messiah, with the result that all are one in Christ. It cannot be tied to the legal obligations of the Torah, since these had the function of separating Israel from the nations. But with the dawn of Messianic times, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts as a badge that identifies members of the family of God. The gift of faith expressed in baptism, and here he jumps ahead a little bit, that's Romans 6:1-4, is what counts, since it gives entrance into the Lord's covenant community regardless of one's race or prior religious affiliation. The reason I'm stressing that is, as you know, I've been stressing when we come across things like our lack of oneness in the modern church. We can argue about what that means, but our lack of oneness is of the devil. We have got to come together, and not pragmatically, because it is the very face of God. God is one. That is the point of this. And it always has been, even when there is difference, even when there is a chosen people. It's always been about all people at all times in all places.
So our friend R.C. Sproul, I think I mentioned this in passing last week. Here is the section highlighted. Chapter 9, Righteousness Revealed, Romans 31:12 3:21 through 26. Here's the next chapter. Faith and Works, chapter 10, Romans 4, 1 through 8. I think there's something missing there. Yeah, that would be verses 27 through 31, which he mentions in passing to set up his exposition on chapter 4. I'm going to read for you again, though, another teacher who I hold in high regard, and that is John MacArthur and his exposition on this section. 3:31, chapter 3, verse 31. He says, Paul, knowing he would be accused of antinomianism, which is a term you just dropped, being against the law, for arguing that a person was justified apart from keeping the law, Paul introduced here the defense he later developed in chapter 6 and 7. By this faith, we uphold the law. Salvation by grace through faith does not denigrate the law, but underscores its true importance. As you were alluding to, Steve, and pointing out, by providing a payment for the penalty of death, which the law required for failing to keep it, by fulfilling the law's original purpose, which is to serve as a tutor to show mankind's utter inability to obey God's righteous demands, to drive people to Christ. You mentioned a term there as well, Gnosticism. Mm-hmm. And I think how this manifests itself, there are one of two ditches that Gnosticism drives people into. Antinomianism is one, where our bodies have no value whatsoever, so it doesn't really matter what we do with our bodies. And then another ditch is asceticism, I would argue. And that is a severe discipline of the body where you avoid anything resembling pleasure whatsoever. That's a Cliff Notes. There's more to it than that, but that's kind of a Cliff Notes version of asceticism. What I see in our day and age, actually, is this weird amalgamation of kind of both of those ditches, especially with the prominence of social media and how we can signal our virtue on the daily. It's kind of this rhetorical asceticism, if you will. And I think that is Gnosticism in every era rears its ugly head in one way or another. But the common thread throughout all of this is kind of what I mentioned yesterday. I can't remember if it was the overtime or on the main show with Buy, Sell, or Hold, in a question about the Great Commission. Is the Great Commission a qualitative or a quantitative statement or demand? It's both. Mm-hmm. Make disciples, quantitative. What is disciples? A qualitative descriptor. Mm-hmm. And I think with this passage, the mistake that is made quite often is that we completely divorce the body and the soul. It is both and. Now, we can quibble about justification through faith or by faith. We can quibble about that, and from my vantage point, it's a chicken or the egg type of thing, as is a lot of the conversations we've had. But I don't think it is up for debate that those things are inextricably linked, faith and works. Faith and works. I think I prefer the way that you put it. Your works cannot not flow from true faith, if that is the case. If your heart is truly changed, you cannot not have works follow. And we can get into one-off situation. Well, what about your deathbed? How do you know? We're talking about practical applications here. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by completely, and this mistake is made, I think, a lot. I'm not saying that I'm perfectly all the time rightly dividing this, just doing my best, is completely divorcing what you do with your body and the soul, faith and works as well.
You said something I think we need to spend some time unpacking here this hour. Why does Gnosticism have a tendency to just regroup and redeploy throughout the church era over and over and over again? I was watching our new buddy Seth Gruber at Clear Truth Media. I was watching his documentary yesterday afternoon, The 1916 Project, kind of his answer to the 1619 Project, right? Okay. The 1916 Project, talking about Margaret Sanger and Malthusian ethics and eugenics and how that led to much of what we see from the progressive worldview today. And Seth is pointing out that really abortion is not the state-sanctioned child sacrifice is not an issue that's part of a progressive hydra, but it is the core issue at the heart of the progressive hydra. Okay, that if you take that away, that it's the plumb line, and his documentary does an excellent job explaining it. And even he used a phrase in that documentary that I watched yesterday. He referred to Margaret Sanger and her adherents believing in something he referred to as a cultic Gnosticism. And again, these are, people discussing and debating these things in the early 20th century, nearly a full 1900 years after Paul writes the words that we are talking about right here that led to this conversation. And so why does it reboot? Why does it redeploy over and over again in the church era? After the break, I want us to spend some time, and I think we should do that before we go to a new chapter. Let's discuss that coming up here in just a few minutes. First, I want to tell you, though, about our friends over at Jace Medical. They're hosting an exclusive getaway right now where you can win a free Jace case for life. That's right. You win a Jace case every year for the rest of your life with no purchase necessary to enter. The contest ends, though, at the end of this month. Okay. So don't hesitate. It expires on August 31st. You can go and register for free at jace.com/Deace. That's JASE. For jace.com/Deace. And when you buy, you can, we'll talk about that in a minute. Don't have to buy anything to enter the contest at jace.com/Deace. I want to make sure I make that very clear. Now, while you're there, if you want to get a Jace case, and trust me, if you have not gotten one, you do. You cannot trust the people running this system. If we have not learned that, I don't know what else would cause us, and I don't know that I want to know, what else would cause us to learn this lesson other than the last few years. So get a backup of some of the most important medications that we've ever discovered and manufactured as a species. And then also you can expand it to include the medications that you, or especially an elderly loved one who's a ward of the state, if they're on Medicare or Medicaid. Get that right now. Also, when you go to jace.com/Deace, if you use Deace at checkout, you'll get a discount on your order. All right. So discount code Deace at checkout for the discount on your order at jace.com/Deace, JASE for jace.com/Deace. All right. When we come back, why does Gnosticism consistently get rebooted on the Devil's Greatest Hits album? Let's discuss that next. Remember when that local bank used to be, a pivotal cornerstone of the community, sponsored the 4th of July parade every year, all right? The Christmas nativity display in the town square, right? Well, nowadays, many banks oppose what we stand for, and they're sponsoring Pride Month instead. So if you are looking for an alternative, there is one. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, man, I'm all in on the parallel economy bit, Deace, but right now is not a great time to be taking chances with what little money we all have left. I get that. But here's the thing maybe you didn't know, you didn't get. The America's Christian Credit Union's been around for 65 years. It's older than me. It's as old as my mom. And they've been serving God-fearing Americans with integrity and faith ever since. If you want to make the switch today, you can get great rates, cutting-edge mobile banking, access to over 5,000 shared branches and 30,000 ATMs nationwide. So yes, it can be a hassle, but do you know what those corporate banks are doing with your money? If you're interested in making the switch, America's Christian Credit Union, founded by pastors for the benefit of its members and for a limited time, you can earn $400 when you open a new checking account with qualifying activities. Plus, our followers will get an additional $100 bonus with the promo code Steve at checkout. So visit americaschristiancu.com/Steve for complete program details. America's, plural, americaschristiancu.com/Steve. All right. Faith-aligned banking is within reach. Make the switch today. Terms and restrictions apply. Visit americaschristiancu.com/Steve for complete program details and to get started. That's America's Christian Credit Union, americaschristiancu.com/Steve. And, of course, they're federally insured by the National Credit Union Administration. So Aaron last segment talked about Gnosticism being consistently rebooted by the enemy, and something maybe you guys have heard me say for years on the show, is that the devil just has a greatest hits album, and he just racks the albums. Sometimes they're on, parchment, and okay, sometimes they're on phonograph, and sometimes they're on vinyl, and sometimes it's on CD, and sometimes it's on cassette. Okay, but it's the same handful of songs over and over again. And every band has like a signature song on its greatest hits album, right? Like if the Eagles, and just think of a few bands. If the Eagles' greatest hit signature song would be what?
Hotel California.
Absolutely, right away. Led Zeppelin's signature song would be what?
Stairway to Heaven.
Stairway to Heaven, right. You see what I'm saying? Right. And Gnosticism, I would argue, is the devil's greatest hits album's signature song.
Correct.
Why? What is unique and intrinsic about Gnosticism that it's that we don't just fall for the banana in the tailpipe, we seek that banana out and we'll plunge it into our own tailpipes.
I don't want to get too far out ahead of my skis or yours, but is the answer going to be similar to why does communism keep popping up through history now, at least in recent history?
Could be. But you guys want to chime in on this? I'll let you go first. Go ahead.
I think this is the easiest theological question you've ever asked.
Okay, then the floor is yours.
What's
by all
the
means.
deadliest of all the deadly sins?
Yep.
Pride.
That's it. Why do you think we just started? What occasion is there then for boasting? This is not a rhetorical flourish. The answer is all of them. The Democrats are telling you, killing babies for free? Check. Training your kids? Check. All of them. We want to boast about everything. It's who we are. That is why it's called the deadliest of the sins. And in this age, where the I is God, Paul himself, hey man, I was boasting about myself while I was holding the close of those who were stoning Stephen to death. We love ourselves. That's why.
That is absolutely the number one reason why. The idea that I have glommed onto something that no one else knows. Right? I am, I have figured something out that no one else has.
Socialism has never been done correctly.
That's right.
Why do you think COVID felt so good to so many people? I'm on the team. Yes, I'm going to mask you. Yes, I'm going to lock you.
Yes.
This feels so good.
And let me reiterate again, how were we so successful in debunking much of that COVID narrative on this show? It wasn't through some secret means. I did not get smuggled under the cloak of darkness into the Ministry of Health in Denmark. And I was able to crack the safe and break through their firewalls to get into the secret data showing what the real IFR and CFR of COVID was, what the real pathogenic vulnerability flowchart of COVID-19 was, that they didn't want to show the world. I didn't do any of that. I went on Denmark's Ministry of Health website, ran it through Google Translate so it would be in a language that I would understand. I looked at it, I read it, and then I shared it with you. That's what I did. That's what I did. When we wrote Fauci and Bargain, one of the best-selling books of 2021, it wasn't just Todd Erzin and Steve Deace sharing their intricate knowledge that no one else has, only a select few. So that we make us your shamans, make us your gurus, your Svengalis. Follow us. We know the way. No, we wrote a book and then put more footnotes in it than pages. So you could actually go check, see for yourself if what we're telling you is true. That's what we did. That's what we did. God is a God of truth. He wants to be known. One of his greatest desires is to be known. To the point he'll put himself in human form. He'll write a book. He'll perform miracles. He wants to be known. The stuff of secret code. I just figured out that there were two Jews camps. There were the religious Jews, and they got taken over by the Frank Jews, who were the Zionists. And I just figured this out in the year 2024. No, you're a moron, or you're the demonic deceiver yourself. That there was nothing to figure out. You're an idiot. Repent, and the Lord rebuke you. there's another factor here too. Gnosticism gives us permission to do what we want to do with our wallets and our zippers, which also plays into number one.
Yeah.
But the greatest instruments of that systemic pride that Todd was just alluding to, the greatest instruments of it, the greatest tools of enjoyment of that vanity are found in our wallets and our zippers. For the love of money is the root of all evil. All those nerves that the Lord put in to what is in our zippers. And the constant desire to experience those nerve endings. That's the other thing, gives us permission. Well, it's just, my body's not a temple. There's no claim on it. Something that, again, going back to this 1916 Project documentary I watched yesterday with Seth Gruber, he was pointing out, I didn't know this. I had no idea that Margaret Sanger herself was involved in various orgies and sex cults and everything else. Various forms of promiscuous activity. I didn't know that, but it would make perfect sense. And that's why he referred to it, by the way. I teased this term at the end of last segment. That's why Seth refers to it as a cultic Gnosticism. What are you saying? Thomas Malthus had the secret knowledge that the earth was about to have a population explosion. By the way, what's happened to the per capita population of the earth since the 19th century? Has it gone up or gone down? Down. We're actually in a negative zone. When I mean by that, not in terms of the whole number of people, but in terms of the birth rate, how we replenish ourselves. Oh, yeah. Okay, it's decreasing, actually. Other way around. Malthus was wrong about everything. But Thomas Malthus had this secret knowledge. And then I combine it with this great secret knowledge that Engels and Marx had about what human nature's really like and what human history's really about. That it's really not about what we were told for the last 4,000 years. First with oral and then written tradition. That is really the long arc of history. We were wrong. They told us wrong, guys. And it was not really about fallen mankind running away from its creator as he chases after it with the grace only he can provide. That's not really the long arc of history. It's oppressed versus oppressor. And then throw in a dash of, let's drop those drawers and let's see what those nerve endings can really do when they're unshackled by any of those old fuddy-duddy rules. And that's why this thing just gets rebooted over and over again. It's the Hotel California. It's the Stairway to Heaven. It's the My Way. Pick any great pop culture act performer's signature song. Gnosticism is the signature tune of the enemy and his greatest hits album. It is the national anthem of the kingdoms of this world and their prince. I think that's why. What do you guys think?
So I should have used a more precise term, socialism, not necessarily communism, but they're related. But socialism and Gnosticism are kissing cousins. They both prey on human beings' natural inclination towards spiritual homeostasis, if you will. You don't have to change. You don't have to change. You are fine just the way you are. Everything that's bad in your life is not your fault. In socialism's case, I'm your savior in this life. In Gnosticism's case, this is your savior in the next life. But you don't have to change. You don't have to do anything differently whatsoever. That's why they are kissing cousins. And if you get the reference to kissing cousins, is that necessarily ever a good thing? Not if it's taken to its natural conclusion or logical conclusion. So it keeps popping up because has human nature changed through history? Now, this is the total versus utter depravity argument again. But has human nature changed? No. That's why it keeps popping up through history. Socialism in its many forms, Gnosticism in its many forms. And I would wager that there is a relationship in the church and a relationship in the state between the popping up of both of those.
And by the way, you've both mentioned things that caused me to bring up what I brought up relatively recently. This spiraling birth rate, it's not just a consequence of the demonic. It is in itself demonic. Created in the image and likeness of God, be fruitful and multiply. This is what the Spanish Inquisition, while overreach, yes, we can talk about, but it was battling a sect called the Albigensians, but this was one flesh bad up to the point of procreation. That severe asceticism, that's the other end. Way too much sex, gluttony, orgies, or just like we matter not, we're garbage, we're not even going to procreate. It's not just a consequence of the dynamic. There was overreach, but there was a reason for the Inquisition, because they were fighting demons.
I started making this description last year. The difference between human sinfulness and demonic, in my view, and I could be wrong. And if it wouldn't take much to be a better theologian than me. So if someone who's really good at this and qualified can do this better than me, by all means, I'll take the correction. But the best I can come up with on my own, okay, is human sinfulness is mostly an exploitation of the desires, ambitions, goals, gifts that God places naturally within each of us. Okay, the exploitation of them. Okay, it's that I don't want to wait for a wife to have those to see what those nerves that God put in my zipper can do. I'm going to exploit them before I get to the guardrails that God says these things are to be for, or to whom they're to be for on the other end of the equation. All right, the demonic is a denial of our nature. When we will go outside, when we will now say, I don't have these instincts at all. I don't have these desires at all. I'm an incel. I won't even ask a girl out on a date. I mean, I won't take a risk forming a business at all. I mean, I could go bankrupt. I won't do anything. And I think you see an example of this in the parable of the talents, when the final servant says, I assumed you were this terrible taskmaster that I couldn't please, and so I took the talent you gave me and did nothing. I did nothing with it. I buried it into the den of iniquity. Depart from me, out of my face, the Lord says to that servant. While all the other servants who took what was given to them and risked something with the talents given to them to multiply them were all given some form of blessing based on what they were able to accomplish, a meritocracy, if you will. That's why I tell you, there's no such thing as toxic masculinity, guys. It doesn't exist. It's just all male behavior that isn't masculine. That is what is toxic. There is no such thing as toxic masculinity. All male behavior that is not masculine is what is toxic. Because that's a denial of our nature as men. I'm not a protector. I'm not a provider. I'm not a defender. I'm not those things. That's demonic. Gentlemen, any final thoughts before we get out here today in the last 90 seconds?
Well, I continue. I hope it's true and I know the next week letters or emails. Is that what?
Next week will be end of month feedback, and you won't be here, by the way.
And I won't.
So we will make sure to give the absolute most anti-Catholic positions we can with you gone.
Thank you.
Bank on it.
I hope I hope to be listening from afar, but I hope this is edifying, challenging, the good, the true, and the beautiful. My bar was set pretty high for this, and I think we've met it at the very least. It's been outstanding.
Indeed, and you're still going to hell. No.
It's coming.
There are people out there, I'm sure, who have that in the back of their head, but no, it's edifying every single week. Some of the rabbit trails that we start going down those trails. Those are fun. Those are fun to explore as well, and it's definitely needed, because not only is this refreshing intellectually, but we also, I think, mix a good amount of current day. We're not just kind of pondering the lint in our navels. We were, to a surprising amount to me, more than what I expected to, we are able to draw this into current, which maybe it shouldn't have been a surprise to me, but we're able to bring a lot of parallels into modern times as well, which I think has been exceptionally entertaining. So I'm looking forward to next week and the feedback that we'll feature then.
Indeed. And still time to get yours in if you guys want us, if you've got something that we think is compelling enough that you want us to address it during next week's month Q&A on what we've done so far as Romans. We would love to do that. Steve at stevedeace.com. We're going to stick around and do overtime, 3 non-political questions for subscribers. For the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow. Until then, Romans 8:28.